It is 6 o'clock and I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. Item 3, I would look for an approval of the agenda from the March 12th, 2024, tonight's meeting agenda. Recommendation, the council approve the agenda for the March 12th, 2024 meeting as presented. May I move by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any errors or omissions? Additions, deletions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary minded. Motion carried. The approval of the minutes of the February 27th, 2024 council meeting. Recommendation, the council approve the February 27th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary minded. Motion is carried. Public input section. Again, as usual, each person is limited to 3 minutes. Each person must state their name, and questions or comments are directed here to the chair. Thank you, Kayla. The first one we have up is Linda Mills. So, Linda.
Hi, my name is Linda Mills. I live at 112 Hobson Street. I just have a few comments about the compatibility and accessibility project. I did go to the meeting where I think there were 20 odd people, and it was interesting. Some of the suggestions were not reasonable to me, like an atrium on the side of the council or the this building. But anyways, these are some issues to consider. Why do we need access from Townsend Street to the Fireman's Memorial? Right now, there isn't access to it because the stairs are closed off. So I don't see any reason why we have to have access, because we don't have access right now. Everybody has access from Cumberland Street. Why do we need access to Cumberland between Prince Street and the path next to the War Memorials? So that would be going along the front of the Central United Church. If you look at that part of the road, it's too steep for a wheelchair to go down anyway. So, and I see no need for that a street to be there, a sidewalk to be there, because you have lots of access from Townsend Street, either to the flagpole area or to the in front of the band shell. So it just seems unnecessary thing to have there. A couple of problems about the suggested playground structure. A couple of the pictures in that were things that look like boats. So, you know, it's a great idea to have something maritime related, but I lived in London, Ontario. The Children's Museum had a really neat, looked like an old ship in front of the museum for playground. But what really happened with that boat, it became a garbage dump because you couldn't see inside it. I mean, you could see part of it because you could, you know, it was not totally closed in, but it became garbage. And also it was a little bit unsafe for kids, because if there was somebody in there doing something they shouldn't be doing, whether it might be other kids or older people, and people along the street, whether they're parents there or just other people on the street, couldn't see what was going on inside that part of that boat. So it's something you would normally think about. I just thought about it because I lived there. And what is the purpose of the new red building on that proposal, and how is it related to? And my last one is, what is the cost of the concept and why it's not broken down? So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Linda. And yeah, I see you have that staff will respond to you, so they have your information. So thank you so much. We have only one more, Michael Huskelson. Mike, you want to go down?
Good evening, Good evening, honorable council members and residents of the town of Lunenburg. My name is Michael Huskelson, a director and owner of Abco Industries. I am here before you today to discuss a very exciting initiative that Abco and his partners have been working on for some time, the Lunenburg Electric Harbor. As the world begins to shift to electric vehicles on land, it will also look to do the same to marine fleets, varying from alternative fuels to hybrid and electric vessels. Nova Scotia has a huge opportunity to lead this decarbonization of marine fleets by front-running the technology to support the electrification of our most important fleets. While not all vessels can be converted to hybrid or fully electric, there are thousands of boats in Eastern Canada which operate during short periods of the day, often leaving in the morning and returning in the afternoon. Knowing this, in 2022, Abco and its partner Remote of Dartmouth embarked on a project to bring marine electrification to Lunenburg, furthering and maintaining its relevance in the marine and boat building industry. First, we proposed demonstrating the first fully electric commercial vessel. Check. Abco did this in the summer of 2023. Secondly, to enhance the ownership value of hybrid and fully electric boats, Remote developed Blue Grid, a platform that allows vessel owners to plug into the grid and generate revenue using the batteries of their vessels when not being used for their operations. This would continue to strengthen the NS power grid and decarbonize it. This has never been done before using electric boats. We intend to claim that trophy of being the first. For Abco, for Remote, and for Lunenburg. We are ready to do this and have hit a roadblock. I believe it will force us to perform this demonstration outside of Lunenburg. Despite the best efforts of the Lunenburg utility and the CAO's office to support us, they have also hit rule-based roadblocks that they cannot get around. They are unable to allow us the required bidirectional meter because we are considered an energy storage device instead of a renewable power generator. This is not an issue for Nova Scotia Power and the rest of Nova Scotia. We need the town council to help We need the town council's help to help our utility to recognize the importance of energy storage as an important contributor to grid stability and decarbonization and align itself with the rest of the province. We would request that council make a motion to approve on behalf of the Lunenburg Electric Utility to make application to the Nova Scotia UARB to incorporate energy storage devices with a total nameplate capacity 27 kilowatts or less on a like-for-like basis with renewable generation for the purposes of bidirectional grid usage. This will not only open this opportunity to us for creating a permanent vessel-to-grid hub here in Lunenburg, but also allow others to support our grid with their vehicles or battery packs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. All right, moving on. We have two presentations tonight. First one is from the South Shore Housing Action Coalition, why non-market housing options matter. And at this time, I'll call them down to. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll try again. Good evening, council and community members. I am Nancy Green, and I'm pleased to be joining you this evening on behalf of the South Shore Housing Action Coalition. Briefly, I am here to share information about the importance of non-market housing options in our communities, current housing realities, opportunities for action, and to bring forward some considerations for council. SHAC, as we are known, the coalition is known, is an active coalition which has been working since 2012 to build awareness and facilitate action on the need for improved access to healthy, safe, and affordable housing options across Lunenburg and Queens counties. Housing is a human right. It is enshrined in Canadian law through the National Housing Strategy. We can all appreciate the importance of having a healthy, safe, and stable place to call home. It impacts our health and well-being, communities, and economy. We all have a responsibility to ensure that everyone in our community has access to healthy, safe, and stable and affordable housing options that reflect changing housing needs throughout life. So why do non-market housing options matter? Well, let's look at what we do know about housing in Lunenburg. The ability of a household to live in a community is not solely related to housing options. There are a number of community dynamics at play, some of which are noted on this slide. The current housing situation is reflective of the dynamics between housing, population, and economic realities. On this slide, this is the housing spectrum, which shows the range of housing options required for the health and sustainability of communities and reflects the changing needs of households. Those within the yellow box note where non-market housing options exist. Currently, there are very few non-market housing options available in Lunenburg. Nova Scotia Public Housing Agency operates and manages 30 senior units within the town. Dr. Catherine Leviton-Reed from Cape Breton University recently shared that 89% of rental housing stock is privately owned and operated in Nova Scotia. There has traditionally been little investment in and intentional focus on non-market housing options across the province. We have looked instead to the housing market to meet needs. However, it is unable to meet the needs of everyone. The market controls the vast majority of rental housing, and other than the current rent cap in place on occupied units, there is little regulation to protect the affordability of housing. Even the affordability standards set by CMHC are based on average market rents. The market determines affordability rather than reflecting what households are able to afford. Supporting the development of non-market housing options is an opportunity for investment in the community and can help ensure the affordability of housing. Affordable housing is housing that is affordable and depends on a number of factors, including household income, size, and needs. We encourage you to examine your local context to determine what affordability looks like in Lunenburg. The information on this slide is provided to give you some perspective on what affordability can look like. Spending more than 30% of household income on shelter-related costs, which includes rent or mortgage payments, along with utilities, insurance, and other shelter-related expenses, is an indicator of financial strain and is a marker for affordability in a community. 37.5% of tenant households in Lunenburg are spending more than 30% of their income on housing or on shelter-related costs. I won't go into the details on this slide, but affordable shelter costs for a minimum wage earner household, $720 a month. That's all your shelter costs, not just your rent. The average rent in Lunenburg, or monthly shelter costs in Lunenburg as reported on the census, is actually, the slide says $922, but is actually $992. One-person households in Lunenburg, which have a median income, can afford $820 a month, falling below the average shelter costs for the town. The Nova Scotia Housing Need Report for Lunenburg provides further evidence that homeownership and rental housing is unaffordable for many households in the community. There has been a lack of ongoing qualitative and quantitative data collection about housing needs in our region, which has resulted in the invisibilization or misunderstanding of the extent of the need for housing for all in our communities. On this slide, our responses found within the town's housing needs report recently released this past fall. Residents are telling us housing options are limited, households have left or are considering leaving as a result. Affordability and availability of housing is a concern for many, and the rising cost of living is having a huge impact. We also know housing insecurity and homelessness exists in the community. The South Shore Open Doors Association has received intakes for services from residents of the town of Lunenburg. There's also a number of other factors, but one that I do want to point out here is that there's a lack of access to public housing in Lunenburg and across the region, really. This lack of access, there's limited numbers, but the wait lists are long and continue to grow, which indicates that our current non-market housing options are insufficient for the need. We believe the growth of non-market housing options is necessary to address these issues. There is an opportunity for the town to intentionally support the development of non-market housing options to ensure affordable, accessible, and suitable housing options for those whose needs are not able to be met by market housing. We do acknowledge that the town and council, based on community feedback, has been making progress related to addressing housing needs in Lunenburg. So we want to acknowledge that and thank you for your efforts. Finally, we ask you to consider, how are you going to prioritize and support non-market housing development in Lunenburg? What actions can you take to address the needs of all residents? We have identified a few opportunities and present them here for your consideration. We would encourage you to implement your Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives, regardless of funding being received, and we are here to support you. We ask you to look beyond the numbers to understand the experiences of housing need. Engage and bring attention to the voices that are not being heard. Perhaps consider receiving SODA's monthly data reports at council meetings to build your awareness. We urge you to use available information to make evidence-informed decisions. There's never been more data about housing in our region. Learn about best practices, explore tools available to you to address housing needs and pressures. Consider exploring landlord registries, tourism taxes, vacancy taxes that could be used to fund housing efforts. Support community capacity for the development of non-market housing options. Learn about what other communities are doing. Advocate for changes to enable and support non-market housing development. Partner and engage with the community to explore opportunities. Learn more about non-market housing types, such as housing trusts and co-ops. Connect with and possibly consider becoming a member of the newly formed Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association. And we would ask that you would continue to be engaged with our coalition. You have the power to have an impact and leave a legacy. The decisions you make today will have impacts in the future. It is your decision to make, of course. But we ask that you keep the best interests of your community in mind, and we know you will. Consider the evidence, the experiences, the needs, and your opportunities and options. Your community is counting on you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council at this time? Yes, Councillor Harberson.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Nancy. It's eye-opening. I do keep an eye on the statistics here with soda, and it's not getting any better.
No, and the numbers that we do have are from the 2021 census. It's old data. We know that conditions have worsened in the community, and so those numbers we expect to be higher than that, and we know that they are based on what people are experiencing in the community. And I would, urge you to go to our website. It's just sshac.ca, and you can dig further into the data. I have all kinds of data. Just determining what's important to share.
My question is, you mentioned about being able to help support us in our Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives.
Mhm.
What kind of support could we look to your organization for?
I would say that because we've been around since 2012, we have a number of connections with the community. We're happy to support community engagement efforts, bringing awareness to those needs. Any connections, experiences that other communities have had, we're happy to bring those folks to you and connect you. Yeah, we're just open to supporting it, whatever that looks like. I think we've reviewed the HAF applications from across Lunenburg County, and I think the applications totaled nearly $43 million. That is indicative of the need in our communities and the recognition of the need by our municipalities. We know that they won't all be funded or fully funded. However, it will bring much needed investment in moving housing forward in the community, and we're happy to help. I don't know what that could look like. It depends, but we're certainly interested in supporting community conversation and supporting with any data monitoring, collecting that we can.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of council? Hearing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Meg Sampson and Donna Hoare from Harborview Haven giving us a project update.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Hoare with Grey Cardinal. We have Meg Sampson representing Nickham and Associates. We have other team members and the CEO of Harborview Haven. In the background, there are backup support in case everyone gets a little rowdy. Thank you for having us here tonight to showcase the hard work Harborview Haven and our design team has gone to date. So we're going to show you the update on what Harborview Haven is developing to. I'm going to turn it over to Meg. I'm going to be her Vanna because she likes to point, but if she points, she
I'll be
loses the mic.
stretched. Yeah. Yes, thank you so much for having us here today to run through Harborview Haven. So just a little brief on our design team. We are Nickham and Associates. We're located in the Hydrostone district in Halifax. And we have a special focus in healthcare and a special sub-focus in long-term care. So right now, our design phase is in the construction document phase. Our next phase will be tendering. So just a little kind of brief on where our new facility is versus the existing Harborview Haven. So the existing Harborview is down there at the bottom, as Donna is pointing to. We've kind of outlined in the orange there the UNESCO World Heritage Property. Our new site is located with the yellow kind of underneath it. So just above the Stilia plant there, it's actually located on a hill. So we have great sight lines out to the town of Lunenburg, particularly the Lunenburg Academy, which we've drawn a line across there, as well as the harbor. This is just another view of that. The Lunenburg Academy of note really draws into our site and into the interior of our building. We have kind of a main street that we call Main Street in the building. And we'll show you some slides later on of what that looks like. It's predominantly for resident amenities. It's where our resident hair salon is, our community connection room. And there's two big windows down the end of this main street that look right out at the Lunenburg Academy. So it's a great big focus for us and bringing kind of the facility back to the community. This is a site plan. So just to get our bearings of how we access this site, we have Hall Road right at the top there. As many of you probably know, Hall Road ends. What we'll be doing is extending Hall Road as a way of accessing the facility. You can come around Hall Road into the main entrance of the building where our visitor parking will be located. There's also staff parking located, so another staff entrance there. And we also have a road just for shipping and receiving, as well as an emergency access to Kinnickle Road. So this is just a really preliminary view of the building. I'd like to preface that the cladding will not be blue. And there's a few elements in here that have changed, but just gives you an idea of what the building does look like. One really significant change with this building is that none of the resident rooms or spaces in the facility are underground. Everyone has a view, and that's really our biggest priority with this building. So we just wanted to show you a glimpse at what the exterior design will look like for this facility. In early meetings with the Harborview Haven team, we obviously discussed the town and how impactful and important Lunenburg is. So we drew a lot of inspiration from Montague and Lincoln Street. Part of our studies that we had done with our design team really involved looking at the colors of buildings, the roof line of buildings, the decoration and design of window treatments and door treatments. It became really fun and special for us to be able to be a part of this. So we're just going to show you a very preliminary view of what those look like in the next slide here. So we call this area here our resident courtyard. You can see in the top right, we have an arrow kind of pointed on that plan of what that looks like. The resident courtyard is a landscaped area. We actually have a landscape architect working on it. Not shown here is a lot of greenery and lovely aspects of this courtyard. It will also have accessible paths for residents, and they can use the space all year round. And we also have an upper balcony for residents located on the second level. And so you can see some of those roof line treatments that we've added into the resident room areas. And this is not only just a nod to Lunenburg, but also a really lovely way for family to visit the facility and, say, hey, that's, where my family member is. It's a kind of a way of wayfinding on the exterior. We haven't had any color yet because we haven't selected it, but this is kind of our preliminary makings of what that will look like. And just another view here. Again, you can see on the top right of where that's pointing. We like to call these our plaza spaces. This will also have lots of greenery and landscaping in it that will last all year round. And just another view of that. Thank you. So just briefly going to break down kind of what the building interior looks like. The building is actually accessed from level 2. And that's just based on the topography of the site. So there are, again, no basements, but we do have a retaining wall kind of against the back mechanical spaces. So you enter from level 2. We have our core space, which is kind of where you see all the colors. And we'll go into more detail about that. And all the lighter yellow is our resident households. So we have our core here, the pink where the big main entrance sign is at the bottom. That's kind of our waiting room. We have not only a public and family waiting room, but then a resident waiting room. And you can see this big arrow of Main Street. That's actually the sight line there where residents will be able to see the Lunenburg Academy from. This Main Street, as I mentioned earlier, is quite special. We make it really feel like a street. And in the Lunenburg project in particular, we're hoping to draw a lot of inspiration from the town. On this kind of floor as well, we have the community connection room, as well as a few other gathering spaces for the residents. So again, just showing you the Main Street before we go into a photo slide. So this is from Villa Acadian, a previous project that Nickham and Associates completed. And just a glimpse at what we include on that Main Street area. So you can see that there's kind of these exterior treatments within that space. Residents have the ability to walk down this space and experience, day-to-day household things like a laundry facility, kitchens, the hair salon. It really kind of brings back the town into this corridor. And then we have level 1. So again, we have our resident households in the light yellow here. And then this core here is actually more staff spaces and service spaces on this level, but so some private corridors, but still very much for the residents. So if we go to the next one there, great. So we have our big central kitchen in the orange there. We have staff spaces in the red. Yes, thank you. And laundry facilities and environmental facilities in the light green, and just some seasonal storage and things like that. But then you'll see up in that top corridor there where there's some pink areas, those are all resident spaces again. So just to get everyone familiar with a little bit of terminology that we'll be using throughout this project, and I'm sure you'll hear again, our household is a unit of 16 residents. So just one of those boundary lines, and our neighborhood is a unit of 32 residents. However, while they have the ability to connect and communicate, they are separate spaces. So just showing here, what are the shared things between the 32 residents? We have the outdoor space and a servery, which is where we bring food up from the central kitchen to further prepare it, keep it warm, have it readily available. So that is shared between 32 residents. So everything else, every household has this. We have 9 households altogether. And so every household has a household loop, a living and dining space, a shared servery, as we had mentioned, an outdoor space, a bathing suite, which includes an assisted tub, an accessible washroom, as well as an accessible shower, a med prep room, a care station, and a soiled utility room. All in that core, thank you. And so just going briefly over a floor plan of a resident room, the biggest difference with these rooms is that every resident has their own room. And they have their own washroom as well. So a toilet and sink in the washroom, as well as built-in spaces for all of their things. Each bedroom has ample circulation around each side of the bed, as well as the foot of the bed. A lift track going over the bed, and built-in spaces for a desk and an alcove where a TV fits in, as well as a wardrobe space that is also built in. And a great big window in each room. Again, every room is located at ground level. Nothing is in the basement. And so I think if we go to the next slide, we'll get a better view. So this is from Villa Acadia, a previous project that we did. Just like the main street, you can see that the sill of the window is actually just 2 feet off the floor, which makes it viewing accessible for residents, whether they're sitting in a chair or sitting in their bed. And then just a little glimpse there of what those washrooms look like. And there's a picture pane kind of along the back wall there for a resident, just photos or anything that they would like to bring into these spaces with them. And I think that might be it. Thank you so much.
We get the 10 minutes.
Just, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Are there any questions, Councillor Sanford?
Thank you for the presentation. With regards to the servery, I'm just trying to visualize it. Is it intended that the residents will be able to come together and eat their meals together, or is it intended to be able to take food from the servery to serve residents in the rooms? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So residents, I don't know if we wanted to maybe go back to show it a little bit better. So yes, the servery in itself is a staff space. It's accessible by both dining spaces. So the blue there is the dining space where it holds 16 residents. There's actually a partition, or a full height wall that has a door in between it that can be opened, and then the residents can communicate that way. So the space is intended to be open up so residents can communicate. But as far as just health and safety and, keeping the spaces separate in the event of any type of outbreak or illness, we've kept them isolated in that way, but they're still able to be open when that isn't the case. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Hey, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
All right, moving on from correspondence, we only have one item for information only, a letter from the Coastal Protection Action Plan from the Government of Nova Scotia. No public hearings. So moving on to item 9, business arising and unfinished business. We have 9.1, the Civic Square Compatibility and Accessibility Project. And at this time, I'll hand it over to the Director of Community Development to guide us through that. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm pleased to bring forward the Civic Square What We Heard report this evening, which discusses Vigilant Atlantic's work to date and the results of a public workshop. The accompanying memo includes additional feedback from 2 staff-led consultations, a focus group with members of our local Legion and the disability community, and thoughts from the Joint Accessibility Committee. Concept 3 has emerged as the preferred option as it offers both accessibility and visual harmony with Civic Square's character. So to remind everyone, the goal of the Civic Square project is to make Civic Square more accessible and preserve Old Town Lunenburg's outstanding universal value. Lunenburg's central public spaces and Old Town continuing to fulfill its historic functions are part of Old Town's statement of outstanding universal value. In this project, accessibility and historic conservation are beautifully aligned. By making Civic Square more accessible, we augment its potential public use. In increasing its public use, we enhance Old Town's heritage value. Once Council has chosen a preferred draft concept, Vigilant Atlantic will refine the design and provide detailed specifications and cost estimates. Pending Council's direction and approval of the final design, staff could use this information to pursue funding opportunities. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Hillary. Are there any questions at this time? Yes, Councillor Sanford.
Through the chair to Hillary, just really a comment. I'm wondering if in our documentation where we have Civic Square compatibility and accessibility project, and then we're listing things out and one specifically references the relevant legislation. I'm wondering if we shouldn't include in relevant legislation the Accessibility Act, as it's focused on making Nova Scotia barrier-free by 2030. And I think that drives a lot of our conversation. So I think the more we can get that in front of everybody, so to help the understanding, that might be helpful. So I'm just wondering if we might want to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Halverson.
Thanks. I have a couple. I wasn't at the meeting, unfortunately, so I'm trying to glean from the concept drawings. Concept 3 asks to relocate the cenotaphs or some of the monuments, and I can't really envision where they're going to go, how they're going to be laid out. Is that addressed in here? Am I just missing it somehow?
Through the chair. So in option 3, the memorials are being moved slightly south down the hill into what would be a new memorial plaza that would be at ground level. So these monuments themselves would be much more accessible. And again, representatives of the Legion have reviewed this design.
From what I'm seeing, then, if I read this correctly, it looks like the square-based monument it looks like it's almost where a sidewalk will be, and it looks like there's a bump out for a sidewalk. Is that the plan?
Yep, that is correct.
Following that, I'm curious, considering Linda is here and she's asked some questions. Are these easily answered questions that we can address this evening, or would you prefer to take some time and respond by email?
I can certainly do some very preliminary answers. Thank you so much. So to the first question regarding some of the pathways, again, the goal of the project is to make Civic Square as accessible as possible. And that includes increasing the number of circulation routes throughout Civic Square. Accessibility not only being, can you get to a certain thing, but how many directions from which can you get to a certain thing? How far out of your way would you need to go to get to a certain aspect? And so that was part of what my understanding is that the designers considered when they made the design. The current playground structures that are included in the What We Heard report are solely inspiration images. So those are certainly open to be refined along with the concept as a whole. Regarding the quote unquote new red building, there is no designated purpose for the building. In order to maximize our value for money in this contract, we decided to look at a whole range of issues so that we could take a holistic approach. So, for example, if council in the future wanted to place a structure within the civic squares, where potentially would be a good location for that? Is it possible to address parking issues that we face in the town of Lunenburg by adding parking to Civic Square? So again, it was just to try to glean as much information through the design process as possible to maximize our value for dollars through the design process. So, certainly all of these plans are solely at council's discretion. No decisions have been made as no council vote has been taken. The cost of concept 3 under this particular RFP Again, in part to keep the RFP as lean as possible, a costing breakdown will be provided for the design after it's been refined. Costing, of course, comes with its own cost. So in order to, again, keep this RFP as lean as possible, since part of our understanding of council's direction was to develop something from which we could potentially apply for grants. Again, it made sense to put costing at the end of the process. In terms of the pathways, the playground area in these designs, costs are expected to be somewhat comparable. Again, because we've tried to keep, for example, retaining walls, earthworks to a minimum. The playground is relatively the same size in each of the designs. Of course, depending on the accessibility options pursued for town hall, there would be a very significant cost differential. But one can consider the landscaping aspect and the building aspect of these designs somewhat independently. Of course, option 3 does not include an atrium.
And if I could indulge with one more question. It appears to me that in option 3, there are now 3 entrances to town hall. I don't see where the existing main entrance sits. It looks like that is going to be removed. Am I correct in that assumption? So will there be a reorganization in town hall as well?
Very astute observation. I would chalk this up to a rendering error. The design team is still exploring, based on feedback from the Joint Accessibility Committee, whether a ramp or a lift may be most appropriate for that entrance. That's something that could be added to the refined design. The side entrance, which is currently in use, is in option 3. You can see on the west side of the building, and on the north side of the building, the Townsend Street entrance is still in place. Excellent, excellent point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you, Hillary. And again, I will I'll read out the recommendation. And remember, this is just a recommendation to direct staff to continue with this, as no decisions on the Civic Square will be made tonight. So the recommendation is that council directs staff to work with Vigilant and Mills and Wright on refining concept 3, working with the natural landscape for the Civic Square compatibility and accessibility project based on feedback from the disability community. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any discussion or debate? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Favor. Motion carried. Moving on to new business, item 10.1, temporary borrowing resolution. You will see there are 2 motions here. Recommendation 1, that council read out and approve temporary borrowing resolution as presented in Schedule 1, and recommendation 2, that council read out and approve the resolution authorizing the mayor and municipal clerk to sign the resolution for pre-approval of debenture insurance as presented in Schedule 2. Those are the, I guess, Reader's Digest versions of the very long motions that I'll read out now. So the what would be recommendation 1? Sorry? I think Lisa's explanation would be very helpful, so thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So these borrowing resolutions that are before council this evening are procedural in nature, as they are for fiscal 22-23 capital funded from debt as previously approved by council last fall. So the amount of $603,917 to finance part of the number 4 fire rescue truck and part of the wastewater treatment plant flood protection berm, along with the public works loader, requires the approval of a temporary borrowing resolution as outlined in Schedule 1, which will be hopefully read to you shortly. So in order to secure the financing, in addition to that approval of the temporary borrowing resolution, there is also a need for a debenture resolution for pre-approval of debenture issue, subject to interest rate as outlined in Schedule 2. The interest cap has been set at 6.5% for that, and the deputy mayor has been so kind to say that he would read out those resolutions.
Thank you, Lisa. I can plead that it's my first day with in this, so bear with me as I foul things up. So the first resolution is, whereas Section 66 of the Municipal Government Act provides that Council of the Town of Lunenburg, subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, may borrow to expend funds for a capital purpose as authorized by statute. Whereas the Council of the Town of Lunenburg has adopted a capital budget for this fiscal year as required by Section 65 of the Municipal Government Act, and has so authorized to expend funds for capital purposes as identified in their capital budget. And whereas the specific amounts and descriptions of the projects are contained in Schedule A attached, which includes the number 4 rescue fire truck, the wastewater treatment plant, flood protection berm, and the dresser loader. Be it therefore resolved, that under the authority of Section 66 of the Municipal Government Act, the Council of the Town of Lunenburg borrow a sum or sums not exceeding $603,917 for the purpose set out above, subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, that the sum be borrowed by the issue and sale of debentures of the Council of the Town of Lunenburg to such an amount as the Council deems necessary, that the issue of debentures be postponed pursuant to Section 92 of the Municipal Government Act, and that a sum or sums not exceeding $603,917 in total be borrowed from time to time from any chartered bank or trust company doing business in Nova Scotia, that the sum be borrowed for a period not exceeding 12 months from the date of approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing of this resolution, that the interest payable on the borrowing be paid at a rate to be agreed upon, and that the amount borrowed be repaid from the proceeds of the debentures when sold. Everyone get that? The second one. Whereas Clause 66(1) of the Municipal Government Act provides that a municipality may borrow to carry out an authority to expend funds for capital purposes conferred by the Act or another act of the legislature. And whereas Clause 91(1)(a) of the Act provides that where a municipality is authorized to borrow money, subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, that the sum shall be borrowed by the issue and sale of debentures in one sum or by installments as determined by the council. And whereas Clause 91(1)(b) of the Municipal Government Act authorizes the council to determine the amount and term of and the rate of interest on each debenture when the interest on a debenture is to be paid, and where the principal and interest on a debenture are to be paid. And whereas Clause 91(2) of the Municipal Government Act states that in accordance with the Finance Act, the mayor or warden and clerk or the person designated by the council in policy shall sell and deliver the debentures on behalf of the municipality at the price, in the sums, and in the manner deemed proper. And whereas the resolution of council to borrow for was approved by the Municipal Council on March 12th, 2023. Be it therefore resolved that under the authority of Section 91 of the Municipal Government Act, the Town of Lunenburg borrow by the issue and sale of debentures a sum or sums not exceeding $603,917 for a period not to exceed 15 years, subject to the approval of the Minister, that the sum be borrowed by this issue and sale of debentures of the Town of Lunenburg in the amount that the mayor or warden and clerk or the person designated by the council deems proper, provided the average interest rate of the debenture does not exceed the rate of 6.5%. That the debenture be arranged with the province of Nova Scotia with interest to be paid semi-annually and principal payments made annually. That this resolution remains in force for a period not exceeding 12 months from the passing of this resolution. We have it. So I'll look to Kayla for this. Are we voting on one or the other, or
No,
we are voting on both of these? Okay. Should we do them individually or together?
Individual.
Okay. All right. So we will do the first one. Recommendation 1: the council read and approve the temporary borrowing resolution as presented in Schedule 1 May we have a Councillor Halverson, Councillor Sanford seconding. Any discussion? Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Recommendation 2, that council read out and approve the resolution authorizing the mayor and municipal clerk to sign the resolution for pre-approval of debenture issuance as presented in Schedule 2. May we have a mover, Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. Moving on now, item 10.2, the 2024 municipal election. We have a number of recommendations here. Is there anyone on staff? It looks like Kayla's getting ready to speak to this one.
Perfect. Thank you. So as you all know, our next municipal election is in October of this year. As staff start preparing for this election, there are a few decisions that we need made at the council table. Tonight, we are presenting 4 of those decisions for your consideration. The first decision is whether we want to conduct a paperless election. It's staff's recommendation that we do conduct a paperless election because it provides more flexibility for voters, requires fewer resources, including finding and training poll workers, and is the cheapest option. The town held paperless elections in 2023 and 2020 and received mostly positive feedback from voters. Should council approve this option, like in previous paperless elections, a voting help desk equipped with a computer for online voting will be set up at Town Hall throughout the voting period as an option for voters who prefer to vote in person. The second decision, as required by the Municipal Elections Act, is approving the use of the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia as a preliminary list of electors. I'm going to say list about 18 more times. Because the town had a special election last year, the list of electors we would receive from Elections Nova Scotia this year would essentially be our revised list from last year. Before voting starts, there's also a revision period, which allows electors to make changes and ensure that their names are on the list. However, for voters who are not on the list when the voting period starts, they can easily add their name to the list at any point during the voting period, provided they can prove they're a resident of the town. Should council not want to use this list from Elections Nova Scotia, there's always the option that staff conduct a door-to-door collection to create a new list. However, it should be noted that this would likely require additional resources and time. The last 2 recommendations on tonight's report, as permitted by the Municipal Elections Act, are the recommendations that council delegate some of its administrative duties to staff, including delegating its authority to appoint assistant returning officers to the municipal clerk, which will allow me to promptly appoint someone to assist the returning officer in their duties should something happen and the returning officer is no longer able to fulfill their duties or part of their duties. The second delegation is the establishment of the fees and expenses for the election. Establishing these fees is typically done to set the rate of pay for hired election help, such as poll workers, poll greeters, enumerators. Should council approve conducting a paperless election and using the list of electors from Elections NS, these are not expenses we would incur. By delegating this authority, it allows the returning officer to set rates for anything that might come up and guarantees that those rates remain within the overall election budget, which council approves in the annual operating budget. So should you have any questions on those recommendations or want me to say list of electors another time? Please let me know.
Thank you, Kayla. Are there any questions? Councillor Halverson.
Just wanted to follow up on, I understand they'll have the voting booth here in town. Last election, I understand the veterans wing at the hospital didn't want a station up there, but how do we account for voters who, maybe cannot, for like Harbour Haven and for the hospital there? Do we have one of our staff go up and, ask people if they want to vote and allow them the opportunity on a remote pad or something? How do we capture those people?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we did for the last special election. We reached out to the veterans unit at the Fisherman's Memorial and to Harbour Haven. Just due to the lack of eligible voters, Fisherman's Memorial denied to have us come there. But myself, I did go and have a mobile poll at Harbour Haven where I had an iPad and I worked with their staff to assist them in the voting process.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we have four different motions. The first one is that council approve conducting a paperless election for the October 19th, 2024 municipal election. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any discussion on this? Here seeing none. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Carried. Motion 2, that council approve using the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia as the preliminary list of electors, now you've got me saying it, for the 2024 municipal election. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. That council delegate its authority to appoint assistant returning officers to the municipal clerk to allow the clerk to appoint one or more assistant returning officers to assist the returning officer and act in their absence. Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. And recommendation number 4, that council delegate its authority to establish, modify, and amend the tariff of fees and expenses for the cost of the 2024 municipal election, as well as to outline a procedure for the submission and verification of accounts payable to the municipal clerk. We have a move by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Sanford. It's been going back and forth. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Amendment bylaw to repeal certain bylaws, the first reading. The recommendation is the council approve first reading of the amended bylaw to repeal certain bylaws as presented. Is there any? Okay, take it away, Kayla.
Thanks. So as you all know, staff have been working on a policy and bylaw review. For your consideration tonight, we have 3 bylaws that staff recommend repealing. Those are the skateboard and similar devices bylaw, a bylaw respecting drains, and the prevention of fire bylaw. Each of these bylaws have been deemed to be outdated and are no longer required, or the contents of these bylaws are now within a newer bylaw, and the older bylaw should have been repealed when the new one came into force. If council agrees with these recommendations, staff recommend that council approve first reading of the amended bylaw to repeal certain bylaws as presented.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Kayla at this time? Okay. So once again, I will read the motion that council approve first reading of the amended bylaw to repeal certain bylaws as presented. May we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. 10.4, special events policy notice. Recommendation that council give notice to approve the special events policy as presented. And I will look to Kayla again. There's a few things here, so I'll leave it to you to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, so for your consideration tonight is a proposed special events policy. Currently, regulations for special events are within the town's public places bylaw. However, the regulations in this bylaw provide little reference to the logistical best practice for hosting an event on town-owned property. The new proposed bylaw includes event approvals, restricted events, the refusal of an event, accessibility, special event signage, waste management, and other practical details that are commonly found within a special events policy. In Appendix A, the proposed policy also outlines annual events council agrees to support through in-kind services. The events highlighted in Appendix A are annual events that the town has supported for years. The monetary amounts associated with these events are based on the amount of in-kind services the town typically supplies to these events each year. By including these events in a policy, we seek to formalize a practice that has already been happening for years, and we also seek to remove the need for these organizations to come before council each year to request these in-kind services. The proposed policy also notes that community events not included in Appendix A or services beyond the monetary amounts set out in Appendix A will be paid for by the event organizer, or the event organizer may make a formal request to council to have fees waived. The proposed policy also notes that anything in Appendix A can be changed at any time by a motion of council. Should council agree to move forward with this new events policy, there are a couple of housekeeping items that staff recommend. such as amending the public places bylaw to remove any reference to special events, and that the annual town parade policy be repealed. By amending and repealing these documents, we ensure that the rules for special events, including parades, are all housed in one policy.
Thank you. Any questions for Kayla on this? Councillor Moser.
Well, not so much a question as a thank you, because ever since I've been at council, there's always been someone on council asking for this to come forward. So kudos to Mr. Doyle and his staff for bringing this forward to us finally. Thank you.
Councillor Halverson.
Just one, where we are creating this from scratch. One of the, I was looking through it, and one of the items I looked at, number 13, security and crowd control. It reads, depending on the complexity and scale of the event, organizers may be required to provide details of security measures for their event. Where is it? I couldn't find it in the policy where it was laid out, how we determine complexity and scale. I think we should have some quantifiable something so that people know what to expect when they apply for these permits.
Yeah, so we intentionally left that a little bit vague because if you were to have, say, alcohol or a beer garden at your event, the provincial permitting requirements make that you require to have security at your event. However, if we wanted to set our own parameters of, say, a participant threshold, if we are going to exceed 400 people, perhaps we'd want to see our own security. However, there are some checks and balances that provincial permitting requirements require that security, such as alcohol permitting.
So we feel like we're comfortable with the provincial policies capturing that requirement then.
Yeah, and then that could be discussed a little bit more within the application process. So by staff reviewing the full-on application, should staff deem that the scale and scope or the complexity of the event would require this, then we would, under the policy, tell them that would be a requirement.
Okay. Thank you. And then the only other question I had was number 16, a special events guide will accompany this policy procedure, which intends to, give them relevant information, tell people how this will be used. When will that be produced? And I mean, it's not here, so I'm just can't have a look at it just yet.
Yeah, definitely. So we do have a draft of that would just need to be cleaned up a little bit, and we could include that for when decision comes to approve this policy to be included in the council agenda.
I would appreciate that.
And then that would also be included in on our town website to aid people in the process.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Service, yes.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. As I was reading through this, and I think again, to Councillor Moser's point, a lot of good work went into this. I'm wondering about when I got down to refusal or cancellation of an event if the town cannot provide the requested site or services. And if you just bear with me for a minute, I'll wander for a bit and then I'll get to where I need to be. But it caused me pause to think in relation to planning around the civic squares, where I kind of went in my thinking about staff being able to work with community. So as an example, if and when we move forward with civic square changes, I think of the Folk Harbour folks who do the summer series bandstand concerts. So in my head, I was thinking it would be really important for staff to be able to work with community, to be able to, here I'm saying work collaboratively to find alternative solutions. So come up with the best possible scenario for stakeholders that are involved when we're moving to change something or develop something as we move forward. It would be similar to working collaboratively with the members of the Legion around Remembrance Day, should that the timing, being mindful of the timing and Remembrance Day ceremonies and perhaps changes that are being made in the context of monuments in the Civic Square. So then that led me to thinking that under the administrative procedures and the staff roles, I'm wondering if we might not consider adding to the Director of Community Development another line there that says the Director of Community Development facilitates planning with community and staff to mitigate challenges posed by change and development. and or development, something to that effect. So in the long run, we can achieve the best possible outcomes for the stakeholders, for both the town, for the work that needs to happen, and for the members of the community that are actively holding events and things that we count on. The only other point I had was, and again, I'm thinking about the Folk Harbor folks, and I know that they're working years in advance, you know, from one year to the next, they're planning ahead by a year. So I'm thinking when we talk about the town reimbursing, if something had to be canceled, the town reimbursing any fees that were associated from which an organization would have paid to the town. But I'm wondering if there shouldn't, like, I'm wondering how or what should be looked at in the context of folks that are planning a year out are making commitments. So there's more involved expense-wise on their behalf because of the commitments that they're making in the context of offering events, right? So I don't know if there needs a little look in there or if there's something we can do in there to better work recognizing those things that are happening as a part of planning process for people who are using our public spaces. I don't know, I'm just putting this all out there, okay? So having said that, I'm wondering if instead of the motion that currently exists, if we might not want to consider having this go back to staff for a little bit of tweaking and finessing, and then maybe bring it back to the next meeting to look at it again, or no? Yes? No?
I would just like to note
Thank you.
that per our policy development and review policy, administrative procedures are approved by the chief administrative officer, the council, which accompany and operationalize our policy. So if council were to see those changes and they were just solely based on what you're seeing in the administrative procedures, then that is something that we don't need to come back to the council table to amend. We could have that amended. And the actual notice for the policy is everything you see above the administrative procedures.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Harbison?
Just to Councillor Sanford's point, as someone who spent 20 years in live event production, I can tell you that anyone putting on any kind of large event will carry insurance. So in case of a cancellation, I mean, it varies what that would cover and why, but I mean, that really shouldn't impact, we shouldn't have any bearing on their ability to cancel their show and be able to reorganize in time. I think it's more what you're talking about is more like an emergency last minute cancellation, right? So I just want to share that with you.
Any further? Okay, well, we do have some motions coming up. Did we, Councillor Sanford, did you wish to amend the motions as they stand, or? Well, we will go through these and see where we are. So the first one is that council give notice to approve the special events policy as presented. Moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. Recommendation number 2, that council give notice to repeal the annual town parade approval procedure policy. Moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. And the third motion is the council approve first reading of the amended public places bylaw number 55 as presented. Do we move by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Halverson? Do we have any discussion? Councillor Sanford.
So am I to understand, through the chair, maybe to Kayla, that I'm wondering if I'm getting if I'm getting confused with the exemption of folks that are getting in-kind financial support from the town with their ability to access permits for special events. So I guess I'm just looking for just a little more clarity to help me not be as confused as I am, and I've probably done this to myself, right? But I'm trying to understand that the public places bylaw is speaking to in-kind services, the elimination of folks who are repeat over a 5-year window, not having to get permits every time they want to do an event, and to eliminate the parade piece. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the amendment of the public places bylaw is only going forward, so we don't have rules for special events in, say, 3 different places. So the new policy, if council chooses to approve it at the upcoming meeting, after today's notice, all of the rules for our special events would be within that one policy. So just by amending, that's why I called it a bit of a housekeeping. And if we go back even to the last agenda item where we had with the repealing, I definitely think a few of those bylaws should have been repealed when we brought in new, more comprehensive bylaws, and they just kind of got missed in the shuffle of bringing in new policies or bylaws.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that to help me to better understand.
Hey, are there any other questions on this motion? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motions are carried. Moving on to item 11, notices of motion, information requests, and council reports. We do have a notice of motion from Councillor Mosier from the previous meeting of February 27th. And the recommendation is the council directs staff to contact the Department of Transportation to express safety concerns about the 4-way stop in Lilydale. Councillor Mosier, is there anything you wish to add or speak to on that? Okay. Okay, very good. So it's been moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion is carried. Are there any other notices of motion from floor? Yes, Councillor Halverson.
Just following up on our presentation tonight from the South Shore Housing Action Coalition. I really feel like her recommendation that council ask for periodic updates from the South Shore Open Doors Association or from SHAC, just so we keep top of mind the number of people who are living unhoused in our communities. I don't think we need a formal presentation from the organizations like we do with our CMP, but I think I'm not sure how to frame the motion. I'll ask Kayla perhaps to help us with that, but I look to staff to perhaps provide us some at regular intervals an update on where we are in our community with the homeless situation.
Thank you. I was actually in Halifax today, and I saw the situations with housing that are going on very much there. So a very good point. And I'll look to Kayla. Are you able to capture that?
So the notice of motion we have suggested is that council directs staff to seek periodic updates from the South Shore Housing Action Coalition and the South Shore Open Doors Association to be included in council agenda packages.
Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, to seek periodic updates.
Okay, great. And I trust that we can just speak with them to find out when, I believe South Shore Open Doors, they release information every month. So if we could have it, the start of every month or whenever it comes out.
Yes, and I see Hillary nodding her head. So I think she's in frequent communication with these two groups.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Halverson. That will come up at the March 26th meeting. Are there any other notices of motion at this time? Seeing none, I thank you all and declare the meeting adjourned.